Hello, Petal. How you doing? How have you been? Did you enjoy the last chapter? Was it good? Thank you very much for the comments. I'm just collating everything. And I was thinking, what do you reckon, if we sort of vary the lives to do the fairy tales? So I've had really good input from a couple of you in respect to the fairy tales. So I've got a rough framework of a few. But what I'm thinking of is, do you think it would be a good idea to vary sort of like the times that I do them? I think generally the weekend would be better for me. And I do have a few things that are getting looked into at the moment. So I've got a few appointments over the next couple of weeks. But, as I said, the weekend would probably be better. And we could vary the times from early morning to midday to mid-afternoon, that sort of thing, just so we can all get a chance to join in and have fun with it. So, and of course, we'll always plan it ahead of time because, you know, it's all about us all being in that little community, which I adore you guys. You're amazing. You can't tell you how happy you make me on a daily basis, especially when I see those comments, and you're all so supportive, and I really do appreciate it. And I hope in some way with my recordings it's supporting you as well. And don't forget, you're always welcome to drop me an email and let me know how you're getting on and touching base and that sort of thing, because it's always good to hear from you. It really, really is. Anyway, so we today, I believe, are on chapter 6. I should have really opened this up before I started with the whole recording thing. I hope you like the picture of me recording setup. It's just a soundproof box in a soundproof room in a soundproof house. Well, it's actually not a very soundproof house, as you noticed from last week. Okay, all right, I'll stop whiffling because it's nigh on 2 minutes. And we've got Faust Among Equals by the amazing Mr. Tom Holt, chapter 6. 6 is the chapter today. A fortuitous tailwind and a lift hitched from a passing anticyclone helped Larry and Mike make up time, and they swooped down on the Oosterdok just on 2.5 hours after leaving Brooklyn. They were only just in time. Not that they were to know that, of course. They circled for a while, making caw-caw noises and generally getting used to being seagulls again. Narrators know, I don't know if that's really a seagull one, but seagulls are quite aggy. So it did sound more like a crow, but I can't really do a seagull noise at the moment because of my throat. So I'll let you guys kind of like imagine the enunciation of that one. So I'll get back to the story. Okay. They circled for a while, making caw-caw noises and generally getting used to being seagulls again. Oddly enough, what both of them found strangest was being without their watches. Actually, narrators know, as they're getting used to being seagulls again, you can imagine seagulls with a Brooklyn accent from a human voice to a thingy, so I think I wasn't that far off. I digress. It's like riding a bicycle, Larry observed. Bloody uncomfortable, yeah. No, I meant, and cold, and very, very tiring. Mike tilted his wingtips and dropped down 100 feet or so. Right, he said. We'd better report in, I guess. Where's the map? Larry looked at him. What map? The street map. I thought you had it. Don't be dumb. How can I carry a goddamn street map in a seagull outfit? You think I got pockets in the wings or something? Larry made no reply. He'd been putting up with Mike's logic for approximately twice as long as America had been an independent nation, and although it still occasionally had the power to make him want to scream, he had built up a sort of immunity to it. Apparently, you can do the same thing with arsenic if you take a microscopic amount each day. What was the address again? He asked. Intersection of Kierkegaard and Hassenstraat, Mike replied. I guess we just fly around until we see the street names, or... He broke off and craned his head down under his wing. Hey, he remarked, maybe we won't have to. Look at that. Look at that. That's him, all right, said Lucky George. I'd know him anywhere. Come on, tell me when here. From their window, they could see a man in mirror sunglasses and a green jacket strolling along the canal bank with a long brown paper parcel under his arm. At a respectful distance of maybe 5 yards, there followed a troop of assorted demons, all unexpected heads, misplaced organs and unfashionable colours, wheeling handcarts. The courts were piled high with some very impressive-looking machinery, the specific uses of which you couldn't hope to guess if you didn't actually know, although you'd have no trouble coming up with the general idea. For the record, they were a set of the latest state-of-the-art magical effects suppressors, together with generators, transformers, and other ancillary hardware, capable of neutralising supernatural forces up to 30 kilograles within a 100-yard radius. Nobody seemed to be taking the slightest bit of notice, probably because the entire procession was theoretically invisible, a wonderful new effect produced by photoelectric mimesis. Put simply, the process works by making the subject closely resemble the viewer's most boring relative or acquaintance. The viewer is then so preoccupied with getting past without being noticed himself that he doesn't stop to look twice at the subject. The only living person in the cosmos who cannot be taken in by theoretical invisibility is, of course, Lucky George, all of whose relatives have been dead for centuries, and none of whose friends are boring. "Where?" Helen asked, hopping towards the window with one leg in and one leg out of a pair of Anne Klein slacks. "I can't see!" She froze. "Hey, that's not possible!" George grinned. "I know. Personally, I can see my Aunt Hilda, my cousin Norman, my cousin Norman's second wife's brothers, and what looks like 7 enormous cappuccino machines. You make a break for it down the back stairs, while I try and hold them off with a few—" He stopped mid-sentence, his face a picture of absolute bewilderment. Then he swore. "Suppressors," he muttered. "Nuts. All right, we'll just have to run for it. Come on." Meanwhile, the magical effect, which he'd launched by way of a ranging shot and which had ricocheted off the suppressor field, sang away into the upper air, bounced off his TV satellite, and was broadcast into millions and millions and millions of homes worldwide in the form of a 7-hour-long subtitled Japanese art movie about a day in the life of a portable typewriter. Lundqvist looked up and sharply raised his hand. "In there," he snapped. As pussies went, he reckoned they were no worse than being trapped in a lift with an independent financial advisor, second-rate press-ganged local evil spirits, reluctant to get involved and anxiously awaiting any pretext for slipping quietly away to a bar somewhere. He could handle them. "You," he said to the tallest demon present, "rig up the kit and give me maximum power. The rest of you, fan out. Don't let anyone or anything leave the building. And," he added, "remember, I've got all your serial numbers, and anyone who's not here when I get back is going to find himself in an oil lamp granting wishes so fast his hooves won't touch." He hitched up his trousers, unwrapped the flamethrower, and strode towards the house. His hand was on the doorknob when something white, wet, and smelly hit him smack in the eye. Sorry. I digress. Onward. "Shut!" Larry shrugged modestly. "It's a gift," he said. "Either you got it or you haven't. Your turn." By this time, Lundqvist had wiped his eye carefully with his handkerchief, turned round, and stared long and hard at a goat-headed electrician who'd sniggered and put on his hat. Bugger the doorknob, he was thinking. In fact, bugger the door. He turned the dial on the back of the fuel tank to 1/4 power, pressed the pilot light switch, and a passing seagull swooped down, gave him a nasty nip on the left index finger, and rocketed off into the sky. Lundqvist swore, dropped the flame gun, and sucked the wound. While he was thus occupied, a second passing seagull flapped up behind him, caught the fuel throttle awkwardly in its beak, and twisted it on to maximum. The flame gun at his feet at once erupted, making Lundqvist jump about 3 feet in the air and dislodge his sunglasses. By some quirk of fate, some quirk of gravity, they reached the pavement before he did, although they had quite some way further to go, just in time to be under his feet when he landed. There was a crunch, like a lorry crossing gravel. 2 seagulls met in mid-air. "That'd better do for now," said Larry. "Otherwise he might start to suspect." He didn't finish what he was saying, his attention having been distracted by a 50-foot jet of fire passing within 20 centimetres of his tail. With more speed than dignity, the seagulls withdrew. Outside the back gate, meanwhile, a demon stood guard. He had the head of a dog, the nose of a griffin, broad bat-like red wings, a pitchfork, 4 feet of tail, and a stammer. He was the diabolical equivalent of 16.5 years old, and this was the first time he'd ever done anything like this. The reason why he'd been assigned this spot was because he was just too junior to be able to refuse. "Excuse me?" He looked up. Despite his poor eyesight, he was short-sighted. Glasses made him feel self-conscious, and, although he had contact lenses, such was his biochemistry that they melted as soon as he put them in. He could see that the back door had opened and a female head had appeared around it. He swallowed hard and tried to remember his lines. "Halt!" he said in a high, quavering voice. "Sorry, what was the choice again?" "Friend." "That's all right then." He lowered the pitchfork and stepped forward, and 5 seconds later he was lying on his beak, wondering how come the house had fallen on him. Helen of Troy, for her part, was looking at a slightly bent silver candlestick and sighing.
"Okay."
She nodded. "George," she said, as he came out of the house and locked the door, "we are friends, aren't we? I mean, you and me."
"I guess so," he replied. "Why?"
Helen stepped over the demon. "I'd hate to think I told a lie, that's all. Which way now?"
George shrugged. "It doesn't really matter, so long as it's generally northeast. All I really need is a phone box." "Ah, there they are. About time too," he said,
as 2 seagulls flopped down onto his outstretched wrist.
"What kept you?"
"We came as fast as we could," replied Larry, wounded.
"Like hell you did," George replied. "What were you doing? Waiting for the exchange rate to swing in your favour? Follow me."
By dint of reckless trespassing in the gardens of perfect strangers, they came out by the Westerkirk, where George flung himself into a telephone booth, grabbed the receiver, and rattled his pockets for change. Helen sat on a bench and took out her powder compact. The seagulls ate a discarded ice cream cone.
"Right,"
said George, stepping out of the booth and not bothering to gather the cascade of change that was flooding out of the coin box.
"That's all settled. Lunch?"
Larry raised his head. "Settled, Chief?"
"Settled. What we need,"
he went on, leading the way,
"is either somewhere with a garden or somewhere they don't mind pets. Otherwise you two will have to hover overhead with a bottle of lemonade and a packet of crisps."
Helen of Troy gave him a look. "Settled exactly how, George? Not that I'm doubting you for a minute, of course, but—"
George grinned. "I found a couple of old friends of mine," he said. "They're on their way."
He glanced up at the sky, smiled, and nodded.
"My only regret is we'll miss all the fun."
The ability to make friends easily is a gift you're either born with or you aren't. If you've got the knack, cultivate it. It's worth having. People who have the gift do tend to find life rather easier than the rest of us. If they want a new solenoid for the car, they get onto their friend who works in a garage. If they fancy a holiday in Portugal, they stay in the villa which belongs to a couple of friends who only go there for 3 weeks in July. The houses of the friends of builders tend to sprout porches and extensions like a flourishing tree. Lucky George is to the likes of these as Sargasso Sea is to 9 square inches of pondweed.
"I can see that,"
Lundqvist observed. There was a certain icy quality in his voice which would have started an Eskimo property developer rubbing his hands and applying for planning permission. The demon, who had just remarked that the fugitives would appear to have escaped, shrank back and tried to look inconspicuous, something he frankly wasn't cut out for. He was unsuccessful.
"Okay," Lundqvist went on. "You're such a goddamn expert. Go find them."
The bounty hunter growled irritably. He should, he knew, have been exercising his uniquely incisive mind on what the fugitives were likely to do next, but try as he might, his thoughts kept straying off in the direction of seagulls, bird snaring, and new and savage advances in the ancient art of taxidermy.
"Jump to it,"
he snapped, breaking free from his reverie.
The trail shouldn't be hard to follow.
With a soft whimper, the demon in question looked round and prepared to do his best. Fortunately for him, he was about 85% Norse, having been custom designed for the torment throughout eternity of a cocaine dealer. He sniffed. "That way," he said. "Follow me." Now then, given the choice, a good storyteller tries to keep the early stages of his narrative relatively plain and simple. Clarity begins at dawn, as the old saw has it. Sometimes, though, with the best will in the world, this option just is not available. If confusing things happen, with people dashing about hither and yon and tripping over each other's feet, the narrator has to do the best he can. At least let him try and bring the participants on stage in some sort of vestige of order. In possession of the field, then, Lundqvist and his highly trained and motivated associates. Somewhere off and circling, 2 seagulls. In a taxi bowling down the Leidestraat, sincerely wishing he was somewhere else but remembering to keep a careful note of the time engaged so as to facilitate drawing up his bill of costs at the end of the day, is Mr. Van Appen. In another taxi speeding up the Stadhouderskade, completely at a loss as to what was going on, but chuffed little mint balls at being allowed on dry land 3 years ahead of schedule and looking forward to seeing his old college chum Lucky George again after all this time, one Julius van der Decker, otherwise known as the Flying Dutchman. Sharing the taxi with him, 2 other fellow students from those dear old Wittenberg days, an inventor of parachutes and a shabbily dressed Dane with a habit of muttering to himself, and a TV reporter who'd asked if he could share their taxi as he had to be in an important meeting at the Anne Frank house in 20 minutes. Down below somewhere, the management of Hell Holdings plc roughing out the publicity campaign for Fryathon 95 and blissfully unaware of what was just around the corner. In the gods, God. 2 seagulls swoop stuck alike on a traffic jam by the Stad Schurberg and peck frantically on the window of a taxi. "Hello, Mike. Long time no see," exclaims the designer of parachutes, winding down the window. "What are you 2 doing in these?" "Use your brains, Slinny," mutters the Dane. "Gee, sorry, of course you're from." The parachute designer lowers his voice to a conspiratorial whisper they could still probably hear in Leyden. "From you know who. Any orders from the big guy?" "Quack, quack," replies the seagull patiently. "Quack. You got that?" "You bet, Mike," says the parachute boffin, grinning. "Just leave it to us. Ciao." 2 seagulls perch, a few seconds later, on the windowsill of a taxi 100 yards further up the same jam. "Larry, Mike, good to see you," exclaims Mr. Van Appen. "This is really opportune, you know, because I was going through the accounts and you guys still owe me for doing the lease of the restaurant." "Quack," interrupts a seagull quickly. "Quack, quack, quack." "Quack," confirms the other seagull. Narrator's note: it's a bit difficult to do a seagull speak as opposed to chicken speak. I will do my research. Mr. Van Appen shrugs. On the one hand, he's simply not the running about type. Every minute out of the office is costing him thousands and thousands of guilders in lost fees, and the course of action to which his client has apparently committed himself is extremely hazardous and liable, if it goes wrong, to have disastrous consequences both for himself and his professional advisors. On the other hand, it's a poor heart that never rejoices. "Okay," he says, "go for it." Helen. Pass the maple syrup. There's love. Cleaving the air like 2 postgraduate smart missiles, 2 seagulls flash down out of the sun on an increasingly ragged procession, hacking its way through the back gardens of the Kaisergracht. Lundqvist sees them, and just as the penny drops and he realises that these are no ordinary herring gulls, they bank in mid-air over the handcarts, snip lengths of wire off the suppressor machines with surgical precision in their sharp beaks, and beat it. No point even trying a shot at this range. With a snarl, he holsters his .475 Wildie, scowls horribly at his skilled assistants, and returns to the task of cleaving a path through someone's begonias with his machete. 3 old college chums standing rather self-consciously on the banks of the Preisenkracht, wondering what they've let themselves in for. "You ever done anything like this before, Jill?" "Nah, What about you, Lenny? The designer of parachutes stroked his beard.
Depends, he replied. In 1499, I designed a contrivance for harnessing the power of the winds and the tides to operate a small left-hand thread ratchet screwdriver. Not that there was any demand, bloody Luddites. Does that count?
The Dane and the Dutchman looked at each other. Frankly, said the Dane, no. Oh well, I suppose we'll all just have to learn together. 2 seagulls flapped wearily over the rooftops and perched on the Dutchman's head.
Hurrah!
They said in chorus.
We're on then, said the designer of parachutes. Over the top and all that.
You can say that again.
Right,
the parachute man continued.
Let the dog see the rabbit. Which one of us do you think ought to say the magic words and so forth? Any volunteers?
The Dane wrenched his mind back from recollecting what a right pain in the arse Lenny had been in the old days and locked it back on course. Tell you what, Lenny, he said, why don't you do it?
If you're sure.
I'm sure.
Joe, how about you?
Just get on with it, Lenny, please. And could you possibly manage to be a tiny bit less cheerful about everything, because you're giving me a migraine?
You always were a gloomy old sod, weren't you? All right then, here we go.
3 old college chums, plus 2 seagulls, vanished. Lundqvist lowered his field glasses, licked his lips and smiled. He didn't speak, but his lips framed the word, gotcha. He was standing in a large, rather mangled gap in the front wall of a fine late 17th century merchant's house facing onto the Prinsengracht. When serious guys take shortcuts, they do not muck about, and observing the rather awkward progress toward him of 3 giant self-propelled windmills. Show off, he said to himself. You, he called to an assistant demon. Full power to the suppressors, now. The demon scurried away and pulled a lever. Nothing happened.
Excuse me,
the demon said in a small, terrified voice.
Only I think some of the wine are missing from the machete.
Lundqvist stared at him for a moment, as if the demon had just leant forward and extracted all of his teeth. Seagulls, he was thinking. Oh, shit.
Try the others, he yelled. Move it, quickly.
The demons, however, were backing away, muttering. As if by telepathy, they had all suddenly started thinking, yeah, sure, we're demons, but this is spooky. A few seconds later, and they had gone. The windmills continued to advance. They were swinging their sails. Little puffs of superfluous flour drifted out on the wind and scattered like mist. You can disconcert Kurt Lundqvist, but you can't frighten him. It took him about a third of a second to get his head together, lose his temper, draw his gun and start firing. Bullets whistled through the sails of the windmills, melted and dropped into the canal. Never mind, there was still the flamethrower. A few deft twists on the fuel tap and a billowing, wind-blown roars of red flame swept across the street and licked the brickwork of the windmills. Complete waste of time. God damn, the Dutch pioneered fire regulations. He could feel the backdraft from the sails now as the 3 shadows fell across him. Time to withdraw and regroup. What would Napoleon have done under the circumstances? Swish, swish. Okay, Napoleon would most probably have curled up in a ball and screamed, and likewise Hannibal and Erwin Rommel. Alexander the Great, however, would have just jumped back into a shop doorway, grabbed the first thing that came to hand, in this case a long wooden pole with a hook on the end, used for raising and lowering shutters, and attacked, by golly. And what was good enough for Alexander was good enough for Kurt Lundqvist. He tucked the pole under his arm, lowered his head and charged. A taxi drew up at the intersection of the Radhustraat and Prinsengracht, and a man got out. He was late for a college reunion.
How much?
He demanded, shocked. The taxi driver said it again, muttering darkly about inflation. The passenger paid him and looked down the street. Because, like the other old Wittenbergers present that day, he was dead and buried. The theoretical invisibility effect cut no ice with him. He therefore saw, in the distance, a man running frantically backwards and forwards, trying to prod 3 windmills with what looked like a spear. Damn, muttered Don Quixote de la Mancha. Buggers have started without me. Okay, thought Lundqvist, as a sail whistled past his ear and cut off a button from his sleeve. That's what Alexander would have done. Any other suggestions? He thrust hard with the shutter pole and had the satisfaction of connecting with a bit of winding mechanism. The pole broke. Ulysses S. Grant, a really savvy guy. He could have dropped the pole and run like buggery. Also Belisarius, Cortes, and the Duke of Marlborough. The edge of a sail swirled past him as he ran, parting his hair down the middle and making him look like a 19th century curate. As he sprinted past the now useless suppressors, his subconscious mind was thinking, "About 3 feet of ordinary insulated cable and I'll have you yet, you bastard." His conscious mind was saying, "Help, help," very loudly. Lundqvist was a good runner. Usually, of course, he ran after people, not away from them, but the principle is pretty well the same. On the corner of Prinsengracht and Berenstraat, he was able to stop, lean heavily against a wall and catch up on his breathing, securing the knowledge that the windmills were a long way behind. He looked up. "Those windmills?" "Sure." The 3 animated monsters advancing towards him, sails slicing the air like so much salami, were probably entirely different windmills, or else the same windmills. Cheating. Did it really matter? He picked up his feet and ran. Not noticing that overhead 2 seagulls were floating on a thermal, in their claws 2 string bags. Simultaneously they let go their payload, said quack, and banked off. The bags hit the pavement and burst, scattering bulbs everywhere. Ordinary everyday tulip bulbs, only recently snatched up from a stall in the flower market. They started to grow. Fortunately, Lundqvist still had his machete with him, and by hacking away for all he was worth, he was able to clear a path through the thicket before the horrible snapping flowers could reach down and wrap their petals around him. Gasping for air and soaked from head to foot in sticky green sap, he staggered out, only to find himself surrounded by furiously sprouting daffodils. Meanwhile, 2 seagulls were hovering in the still air, string bags clutched in their talons. The windmills were closing. The tulips were opening a path for them, letting them through. The key thing to do in situations like these is to keep your head, Lundqvist remembered. As a sail edge grazed his collarbone, he ducked down on his hands and knees, machete between his teeth, and crawled. The sails couldn't reach him down here, neither could the carnivorous flowers. If he met an ant, at least it would be hand-to-mandible fighting. He'd have a chance. Behind him, he heard a rumbling sound like thunder, and the nauseating squeaking of living tissue being crushed. He cast a quick glance over his shoulder and saw a huge, yellow wheel, at least 12 feet high at top dead centre, flattening a squishy path straight at him. Not a wheel, it was a cheese. Lundqvist stood up. He'd had enough. "You bastard!" he screamed. "You fucking bastard! Can't you take anything seriously?" Then he threw himself at the cheese, tripping over tulip roots, dodging the murderous sails, soaked in sap and 3/4 blinded with pollen. As the leading edge of the cheese rushed towards him, he hurled himself sideways, cannoning into a tulip stem, bouncing off the rubbery surface, being hurled like a baseball at the mountainous flank of the cheese. He thrust the machete out in front of him and screamed, and found himself sitting in the gutter, a bent machete in one hand, a large slice of Edam in the other, surrounded by a crowd of bemused onlookers and wearing a baseball cap inscribed with "I Heart Amsterdam." 5 minutes later, a police car came and picked him up. He was later charged with obstructing the highway, disorderly conduct, and 14 breaches of the street trading regulations. I thought Edam cheese had a red rind. It's yellow inside, but I think it's got a red rind. I've had Edam cheese in years and years and years and years. I miss it. Or Applewood, but that used to give me a stonking headache. Applewood smoked cheddar, one of the best things on the planet. Anyway, yes, I miss that very, very much. I miss cheese. Cheese used to be so good. Oh, back in the day. Apologies for the dirty recording. I know that I've left my window open again, but I was too far in. I was too far gone. I couldn't just get up and go and close it. But you know how these things go. If it was acceptable, if you enjoyed the recording, if you could hit the like button and notifications bell, I would appreciate it very, very, very much. If you haven't subscribed already, please do. It really helps the channel. And if you want to share it with your friends, buddies, colleagues, dog next door, please do. I would be very, very grateful. But again, you don't have to. I'm just glad to have you here. I'm very grateful for you. So, as I said before, I've got a lot of stuff going on in my personal life, but don't worry, everything's like getting sorted, and it's just a matter of just getting some things checked. It just means that my spare time now is very limited because I've got a lot of appointments I've got to go to and X, Y, and Z, blah, 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 blah. Yes, anyway, so let me know how you are. Let me know how you're doing. Give me some ideas as to kind of like times and days that would work for you if I did another live again. As I said, it's probably not going to be that frequent, but I'm going to do my very best, and we're going to work with Grimm's Fairy Tales. We're going to rework them a little bit. We're going to tweak them. We're going to be creative. All suggestions are appreciated very, very much. So, most important thing, take care of yourselves. Eat good food, get lots of rest, enjoy the good weather if you have it, wrap up warm if your weather's cold, and let me know how you are, because I do enjoy our little conversations and our little back and forwards and our little comments, because they're always very lovely. And if you don't want to leave a comment, that's okay. You can drop me a line via email. The contact details are in my about section. Yeah, no problem at all. It's all good and gravy. So, always remember, we will mend it, we will fix it, we will stick it with scissors and glue. And did you remember what the other tune was? Dun 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 dun. Wow, wow, wow. Yeah, do you know it? Do you know it? Hey. Take it easy, and I'll see you soon, Petal.